The evolutionists are still lacking the science to back it up. But instead what happens is science that doesn't bolster the case for evolution gets censored out, such as there is no evidence of evolution from going from one species to another species. If evolution had occurred, then surely, whether it's going from birds to mammals or even beyond that, surely there'd be at least one
There's a
evidence.
massive amount of evidence. I'm sorry, but you people keep repeating that like a kind of mantra because you just listen to each other. I mean, if only you would just open your eyes and look at the evidence.
Show it to me. Show me the bones. Show me the carcass. Show me the evidence of the in-between stage from one species to another.
Every time a fossil is found which is in between one species and another, you guys say, now we've got two gaps where previously there was only one. I mean, almost every fossil you find is intermediate with something and something else.
If that were the case, the Smithsonian Natural History Museum would be filled with these examples, but instead they're not.
It is. When we talk about intermediates between species, we're of course not talking about intermediates between modern species. We're not talking about intermediates between dogs and cats. We're talking about intermediates between ancestral dogs and slightly more recent ancestral dogs. Now, in the case of humans, since Darwin's time, there's now enormous amount of evidence about intermediates in human fossils. And we've got various species of Australopithecus, for example, and these are, I mean, some Australopithecus are intermediate between others and ourselves. Then you've got Homo habilis, Homo erectus. These are intermediate between Australopithecus, which was an older species, and Homo sapiens, which is a younger species. I mean, why don't you see those as intermediates?
Evolutionists bear the burden of providing the evidence for those of us who are not scientists to see it. And if the evolutionists had the actual evidence, then it would be displayed in museums, not just in illustrations. So what I go back to, though, I think there is a bit of there could be a hidden agenda on the part of those in favor of Darwin. In Darwin's own words, in which he claimed that there was a difference among the races. And that was then used to promote racism.
Yeah, that's Victorian. Everybody in Victorian
That
times
is the
was
foundation, though. Those who are in favor of evolution often refer back to Darwin. And he is quite a hero of the evolutionist movement.
He is a hero, but not with respect to racism. Now, I just told you about Australopithecus, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo sapiens. By the way, archaic Homo sapiens and then modern Homo sapiens. That's a beautiful series of intermediates.
You're still lacking the material evidence.
The material evidence is there. Go to the museum and look at it.
So what I go back to again is let's look at what evolution and Darwinism has spawned. Let's look at the philosophies that have come out of it that have been so horrific to our world. So we need to look at the philosophies behind and that have grown out of evolution. And what we find are the societies that are the most loving and caring, the societies that are the most well-functioning, are the ones that have a great respect for human beings, for others, because they recognize that each human being was created individually and is distinct from one another. Interesting enough, regarding that, you mentioned how the DNA is common among various species. But among human beings, each one of us has distinct DNA. In fact, that's the one. That's one thing that's quite a way that. Sorry, back up. That's one thing that scientists will use to determine who has committed a crime, is basing it on the DNA evidence. So even DNA helps to show that each human being was created individually.
DNA shows that each human being evolved individually. And of course there are individual differences between human beings, genetic differences, otherwise natural selection couldn't happen. Now, I presented you with, I don't have them here obviously, but you can go to any museum and you can see Australopithecus, you can see Homo habilis, you can see Homo erectus, you can see archaic Homo sapiens and modern Homo sapiens. A beautiful series of intermediates. Why do you keep saying present me with the evidence when I've done so? Go to the museum and look.
I have gone to the museums, and so have so many of us who still are not convinced
have you seen Homo erectus?
And I think that this effort, this rather aggressive effort to try and talk over us and to censor us seems to come out of a frustration that so many people still don't believe in evolution. Now, if evolutionists were so confident in their beliefs, there wouldn't be the effort to censor out information that shows that evolution is still lacking and is questionable.
I confess to being frustrated. It's not about suppression, it's about the fact that I have told you about 4 or 5 fossils, and you seem to simply be ignoring what I'm saying. Why don't you go and look at those fossils?
And certainly, if they were in the museums, which I've been to many times, then I would look at them objectively. But what I go back to is that the philosophy of evolution has led to ideologies that have been so destructive to the human race.
It's been misunderstood. I mean, even Hitler could be described as a misunderstanding of Darwinism, and that's a grotesque and horrible misunderstanding.
Eugenicists, and those in favor of euthanasia, and those in favor of infanticide.
Yes. But wouldn't it be a good idea, instead of pointing to misperceptions of Darwinism, which have been hideously misused politically, if you try to understand Darwinism, then you'd be in a position to counteract these horrible misunderstandings.
Actually, we are oftentimes forced by the aggressiveness of those who favor evolution. It's not as if we are hidden from this information that you keep presenting. It's not as if it's unknown to us because we can't get away from it. It's pushed on us all the time. But I think your frustration comes from the fact that so many of us who have seen your information still don't buy into your ideology.
Have you seen Homo erectus? Have you seen Homo habilis? Have you seen Australopithecus?
What I've seen is that in the museums and in the textbooks, that whenever they claim to show the evolution from one species to another, it relies on illustrations and drawings,
no, it doesn't.
not any material evidence.
You might have to go to the Nairobi Museum to see the original fossils, but you can see casts of fossils, exact copies of these fossils, in any major museum.
Well, let me ask you, why?
See, I am a plaster caster of certain body parts belonging to men and women who make music I adore. Been doing it for over 40 years now. I originally intended it as a way to get laid by the Beatles or the Rolling Stones. Well, that never happened, but believe it or not, I casted Jimi Hendrix. And when I met Frank Zappa, my groupie shtick suddenly became an art form. Because Frank said that what I was doing was art, and I think he was right. And since then, my casts have been exhibited at various galleries. A documentary called Plaster Caster was made. And now, the time has come